I invite now Dr. Richa Nigam, who's going to talk about cognitive aging and lifespan emotion regulation. Request you to please keep to your time. Thank you very much. Please start.
Ma'am, thank you so much for making me begin in time. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you the other presenters for letting me present in time. So I'll be talking about cognitive aging and lifespan emotion regulation. To begin with, I want to thank my my research supervisor, who has been part of this work while we were designing it and executing it. So I'll be talking about cognitive aging. I hope we are all aware of this concept, and emotion regulation, explicit and implicit emotion regulation, and emotional well-being. So these are the things that I want to talk about in my talk. So let me just talk about these terms so that there is no confusion in the end. When we're talking about cognitive aging, we talk about cognitive decline in cognitive functions that is happening as a consequence of aging. All right. And then we are also going to talk about, what I'm going to talk about is emotion regulation. How, despite the cognitive decline happening in older age, emotion regulation is found to be intact. That means how well you manage your emotion as a consequence of you being somebody being old, it is intact. It is not disturbed. Then I'm going to talk about explicit emotion regulation and implicit emotion regulation, wherein we'll be talking about explicit self-reports of people experiencing certain emotion in everyday life, and an account of and another study which is talking about implicit emotion regulation, wherein we are going to tap the distinctiveness with which each emotion is separately represented in participants in a participant's head. So for that, I'll be using an implicit association test. Then I'm going to correlate explicit and implicit test and talk about emotional well-being as a consequence of aging or across lifespan. So I'm using 3 age groups in my studies: young adults, middle-aged adults, and older adults. So this is the format of my talk. Let me just begin with the paradox that we have in effective cognitive aging. So it is found in previous research that as people grow old, they are less affected by negative emotion. Now, how is that? When you are losing on memory, when you are losing on cognitive functions, what is happening? That is still leaving the older generation or older people less affected with negative events or negative emotions. So this is the paradox of cognitive aging. Now, there are 3 accounts which are given for this kind of event that is happening at old age. First is socio-emotional selectivity theory, which talks about that as you grow old, there's increasing motivation for one to maintain their emotional well-being. And this is a very pioneering study. So I'm going to base my results on this theory. The other is dynamic integration theory, which also talks about how through development, as one is developing from young to middle to old, how there's this complex interplay of cognitive and affective processes which integrates and which interact with each other, and how it grows from simple to being very complex. And then there's also some indicators from other cognitive studies which have found early attention in older adults, that they are engaging with positive emotion more compared to negative emotion very early in their attention process. So these are the 3 theoretical accounts, and I'll be basing my results on these 3 accounts. Now, what we know from the previous research is that emotion well-being is maintained with age. Emotion regulation in another study, this is also found that the control mechanisms that we have in the brain, they are implemented as well as young adults in old age, as well as young adults engage. So that is there. And then there is also something called positivity bias that exists in older adults. So when we say that older people are focusing more on positive emotions as compared to negative emotions, we are talking about a bias that is existed in older adults towards positive emotion as compared to negative emotion. Now we know that, there is something called prohedonic motivation or contra-hedonic motivation. Now, what do we mean by that? So these are emotion regulation goals, wherein pro-hedonic motivation means I want to increase positive emotions or the experience of positive emotions and decrease or dampen the experience of negative emotion. When I talk about contra-hedonic motivation, it is the reverse, that I want to increase the negative and decrease the positive. So it is found that there are findings wherein positivity effect has led to increase in pro-hedonic motivation and reduce contra-hedonic motivation with old age. So this accounts for the motivational theories that we have covered so far. But the problem is that most of this data of positivity bias or emotional well-being is all these researches are mostly based on weird sample, which is Western educated, industrialized, rich democratic population. Now, the point is there's a lot of data that is coming from Indian population, but they are all in conflict. Now, some people, some Asian studies say, like in Japanese culture, that yes, we have pro-hedonic motivation. Some say, no, we don't have pro-hedonic motivation. No, what is going on? So for that matter, it was important for us to study that what is happening exactly in the Indian population, which is an intermix of independent and interdependent culture, wherein the Western population so far is considered as independent and the Eastern populations are considered as interdependent. And in India, we are a mix of both. So it was interesting for us to see what is happening here. And the next thing is that we also wanted to know how early, if there is a effective bias that is occurring with age, how early is it happening? Is it beginning from middle age, which is the peak at which cognitive emotion interaction is happening, or is it actually coming only in old age? And is it as a consequence of everyday affective experience, or is it just happening in old age? We don't know. So we wanted to know how early are these effects. So now the current study that I'm going to talk about, it explores differences in emotion well-being trajectory in Indian sample as opposed to what is found in the West. And then, of course, there is focus on individuals' affect regulation goals in everyday life. So I'm going to use experience sampling measure in the study 1 and self-reported measure. So these are two self-reported measures wherein people will tell how they feel about each emotion in their everyday life versus an implicit association test, which is part of study 2, wherein they'll be conducting an experiment like the way Professor Naveen just showed, a lab-based experiment, and then we are going to see a correlation between these two and see what happens. So yeah, what our objective was, we'll see a facilitation effect of positivity bias in terms of implicit affect association in study 2. And then, of course, through study 1, we are exploring the alternate methodology. That means so far the results for positivity effect is mostly lab-based. We are going to tick in the other methodologies, which is diary studies, which is experience sampling. So yeah. So these are the hypotheses that we actually generated. Greater experience of positive affect in daily life will be observed for our population as well. And we are also expecting that with age there'll be distinctiveness with which affect is represented in old age. Now we don't know if it happens from middle age or old age. We don't know yet, and this is what the study explores. And the third is early effects of positive emotion well-being trajectory begins from middle age. This was what we hypothesized. So first study is an experience sampling study wherein we collected data from 90 volunteers, young, middle-aged and older adults. And so they were asked
Fall
to report
prevention
about their...
strategies.
Yes, sir? Hello?
Yeah, you carry on.
Yeah. So in this study, so there were these four dimensions on which participants were questioned, each of them. So this experience sampling measure was conducted for 6 dates in a month, twice a week. So leaving the weekends, and in one session, in 1 week session, it was the weekend. So that way we had 4 work days and 1 weekend, two weekend days. So these 4 dimensions were affect, context, uplift, which is event type, and goals. Wherein in affect they were asked, if you are experiencing joy, then please rate on the scale of 0 to 6 how much joy are you feeling. Similarly for other emotions, the positive and negative emotion. Then they were also asked which context are they in while they're answering these questions. So this was homework, public place, and so on. And they were also asked whether they have since they are responding to these questions, whether they have experienced something uplifting or do they experience a hazard. And goals wherein they had to report whether they want to dampen, maintain, enhance, or not do anything with each of these emotions on a scale of 0 to 6. Whether if they are experiencing joy, do they want to increase it? Do they want to enhance it? Do they want to dampen it? And so on. Yeah. So this will account for pro-hedonic versus contra-hedonic motivations. So, and the self-report measure was again an explicit study of emotion experience, wherein the participants had to report for each of these emotions that we had spoken in the previous slide, whether they are feeling, for example, if I take joy, whether they are, how much of comfortableness or pleasantness do they experience while they're experiencing joy. Similarly, if they find joy disturbing or bothersome. Now, this was a one-time conduction. So they had to report whether they find joy disturbing or bothersome. Again, they have to report the same thing on a scale of 0 to 7, or if they find joy inappropriate, helpful, meaningful, and so on and so forth. Now, these answers were also categorized into 4 things: positive, pleasant. If they find joy as comfortable and pleasant, so that is rated as positive, pleasant, and negative, unpleasant. Okay, and then there is also positive, unpleasant, and negative, pleasant. So these are the 4 dimensions. Now, given these 2 self-report measures, these are the statistics that was conducted, wherein we computed age into affect. Affect is positive versus negative affects clubbed together. Then age into event type, which is uplift and versus hassle. And then there is a three-way ANCOVA, and followed by similar ANCOVA for self-report measure. Now, what did we find? These are the everyday affective experiences, mind you, of the participants, wherein now we find a very clear evidence that older adults, actually primarily all the 3 age groups, were experiencing in their everyday life positive more as compared to negative. But older adults reported to experience lesser negative affect compared to young adults in their everyday life. This was experience sampling based results, and younger adults also reported experiencing less positive affect as compared to middle-aged. So now we see a very clear age difference in their everyday lives in Indian context. Then again, when we're talking about uplifts and hassle, older adults were reporting, they were, no matter what was happening in their life, they reported as experiencing more uplifting event as compared to hassles. And yeah, of course, and they reported less hassles. And again, for the 3-way ANCOVA, we found that overall there were greater experience of pro-hedonic motivation across all age groups as compared to contra-hedonic motivation. Now, the previous research has also provided that contra-hedonic motivation reduces with age. Now, this is what we did not find in our Indian population. We did not find significant instances of contra-hedonic motivation across the 3 age groups in our population at all. And also there were reports of finding mixed affect in Western population. By mixed affect, I mean that, experiencing joy and sadness in the same day at the same time. There were increasing reports of finding mixed affect, and there were none in our population. So that is one finding. These are the 2 findings which are different from the West. Now, talking about self-report measures also, we across all the age groups, we found overall more pleasant and pleasant hedonic tone for all the affects that was experienced across all the participant groups. Now, these are the explicit reports of experiencing emotions in their everyday life. Let's go to the result section, discussion section of this, and then I'll go to the implicit part of it. Now, based on the results presented so far, we can see that everyday affective experiences are shown to be regulated by emotion regulation goals. That means pro-hedonic motivation goals are helping people to regulate, particularly the older adults, to regulate their emotions better as compared to negative emotions. In fact, they focus more on positive emotions. And there's higher magnitude of positive emotion experiences and lower magnitude of negative emotion experiences for uplifts and hassles also, and for pro-hedonic versus contra-hedonic goals. Right? Now, I've already said this, that there is significant prevalence of contra-hedonic motivation in different cultures, but not in our culture. So that is a different finding that we find. And we see a shift in motivation and emotion well-being observed as early as middle age. Now, all these effects, these separate differential observations found, when I say these are found in old age versus not in young age, these are found beginning from middle age in everyday experience of affect as compared to the young adult group. So we can see an early shift in motivation towards better emotional well-being or positive emotional well-being beginning from as early as middle age. Now let's go to implicit affect balance, wherein we try to compute how emotions are represented in somebody's brain. Now the point is, when I say implicit association test, it will tell me if I associate positive emotions as pleasant. So I will take longer in my reaction when I have to club positive emotion as non-pleasant or something else, right? Because that will create confusion in my brain. Now that is what implicit association test does. When all your categories are in the same direction, so it is easier for one to actually categorize these experiences or these emotions. But when you have mixed choices to categorize a particular emotion, then you take longer. So this is what the test looked like, wherein one word was presented at a time at the center of the screen with with 4 choices at the top. You can see 2 at the left and 2 at the right in block 3 here, wherein you, as of now, you see that, there are both the positive choices are presented together and both the negative choices are presented together. Now each word will have one correct answer. Now the participant's job was just to categorize left or right, whether this word will go to a particular word that is presented on the screen will go to left or right. So that is what they are doing. When in 5th block, when positive and negative choices are presented together, that means there is a mixed combination that is presented. Each word has only one correct answer, by the way, either this word, this word, this word, or this word. So all that they have to do is just look for the target word. But when these mixed choices are presented, they take longer. Now in a task like this, we found that there's only older adults which are significantly showing a distinctiveness in their affect representation and not the other 2 groups. That means that there is something happening with age wherein your affect representation is becoming very, very distinct and strong. And that is what is probably helping them in focusing or in maintaining their emotional well-being more. So let me just see a correlation. Let me just go quickly to a correlation of both these implicit and explicit measure. So we see that this implicit scores are not.
Please, may I request you to wind up, please?
Yeah. These are the just last 2-3 slides. That's it. So we see that implicit scores are not correlating with the explicit measure. That means this distinctiveness in affect representation is not happening because of everyday emotion experience, but it is only an age effect. So that is one finding that we got from here. And the other is that with greater distinctiveness.
Please wind up. Please wind up. Thank you.
Yeah. Sure. With greater distinctiveness, we found that it is only affecting the older adults and not the young adults. And yeah, if I go to the conclusion of all this, let me just speak up that, these studies demonstrate first a positive trajectory of emotional well-being over a period of age through qualitative and quantitative measure. Now, there is also positive trajectory of emotional well-being that is reflected in middle-aged adults through a lab-based as well as a daily diary method, which is maturing with age. That means it is becoming more and more distinct with age, but it is nothing to do with everyday affective experiences. And third is that the goals of emotion regulation influences our everyday experiences and interaction with the world. So we see that how emotions are actually acting as a cognitive reserve for older adults to perform as well as young adults. Yeah, I'm done, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.